We all recognize that we have many societal problems, and addictions are a big part of those societal problems. We often talk about the issues with alcohol addiction, drug addiction, which we've seen hit our state in such devastating ways. However, there are other forms of addiction that are out there. And I appreciate the gentleman from Kenton bringing this legislation forward, because there are people who have addictions to gambling. There are people who, because of these addictions, these impulses, make poor decisions that negatively impact their families, their children, people in those communities. And I appreciate this legislation, and I understand where the gentleman from Kenton got his dollar amount from. That was the amount of the settlement. Mr. Speaker, would you have the clerk report House Floor Amendment 1?
Clerk, please report.
House Floor Amendment 1 to House Bill 609.
Gentleman from Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Floor Amendment 1 is a very simple amendment. It just changes the dollar amount that goes into this fund from $225 million to $50 million. In some conversations that I had with the gentleman from Kenton last week, I asked some questions about how much might be anticipated to be used on an annual basis. And based on those numbers that he gave me, I believe $50 million would fund this anywhere from 10 to 15 years going into the future. So that brings us up to a policy question. We all understand there are many needs in our state. Gentleman from Jefferson 36 would tell you that the KERS non-hazardous pension system is only funded at 16.8%. We know that we have members of this body meeting with members in the Senate right now to discuss the conference committee and what our budget will be. We could go on with needs and needs and needs. So the question is, what is the right policy decision for us right now to make on the amount of money that we put into this fund? And I certainly support establishing this fund and getting it going. If we adopt House Floor Amendment 1, I don't want that to be the end of the conversation. Over the next few years, I think it's important to evaluate how the money is spent, how it's allocated out of that fund. And I believe it's imperative that we start, as a General Assembly, whether I'm here or somebody else is here in the future, start looking at how possibly that fund could be appropriated in the future. And I think it's only fair that the people who are generating revenue from these gambling establishments, from these gambling venues, provide some of the funding for this. Now, what that's going to look like, Mr. Speaker, when you and I talked about this, you referred to the handle. My memory of a handle is when I had a CB. I used to have a handle with a CB. I don't understand exactly all those terms, but there are people in here that do. So I feel like that this would be something we could look at in the forward. Mr. Speaker, at this time, I'll be happy to answer any questions. I believe that this is a reasonable compromise, that we can get this fund started, but it would leave us $175 million that we could address many other needs across the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So I move for passage of House Floor Amendment 1.